Good day, everyone, and good day to Ma'am Ruth Arellano Rufano. I am Ana Rose Tunwata, your first discussant for today's lesson. Together with me, Angelica Campo Mayor. But before that, this is our assigned topic. It is all about developing communicative competence. But before that, let me introduce to you first our or my learning objectives. First, discuss what is communicative competence, theories of communication, principles and salient features of communication approach. Number two, identify and analyze what are those theories of communicative competence, principles and salient features of communication approach. Number three, expound the grammatical units such as morpheme and sentence. So those are our objectives for today's lesson. And or these are the following theory of communicative competence. Number one, knowledge about the form of structure of language isn't a guarantee of being able to use it in actual communication situation. So in other words, knowledge is not only a guarantee for us to practice our communication every day, or it's either communication is everywhere. We can talk it anytime to our brother, to our sister, to our relatives, to our friends, or to our loved ones. So that is the number one. Number two, no evidence that students who do well test will exact in their careers. So there are so many students nowadays that they practice their communication skills in order for them to understand or to enhance their communication skills. Castillo from form and structure of language to functions of language. We all know that there are so many language acquisition in today's world, and we as a student, we practice, we enhance our communication skills in order for us to improve our memory in when it comes to learning other language. Also, language learning needs and communication situation become the crucial point of teaching. Yeah, exactly. So learning language is very important in today's world. Also, focus on grammar of rules of correct usage for one's language structure or form mastery. So in focusing grammar, it is very important for us to use it proper or appropriate for in order for us our student they can easily understand what we are talking about. Also, basic principle of a structure-based language teaching method, audiolingual method or the oral approach, meaning it is a new key approach to language teaching. So when we say oral method, it is through the air or hearing. Approach would be the approach to language learning through hearing and speaking. So when we say oral approach, it could be hearing or speaking approach or method. Also, in the theory of communication competence, the language, the advent of the new belief, language is acquired in the context of natural situation. Language competence is seen as focusing not only the grammar of the structure of language alone, but also it is a wider socio-cultural and extra-linguistic context. Yeah, exactly. Then, the theory of communication approach framework of communicative competence is associated with the notions of language functions, points. Also, grammatical competence is a mastery of the language code, that ability to recognize. Theory of communicative competence also include the lexical or the spelling, morphological or the meaning-bearing units of a language, syntactical or the meaning itself, and phonological or the sounds, features to to form the words and sentences. The theory of communication also include in this lesson, learners in a communicative classroom learn to use a rules or a usage of grammar, not to state as what the intent of language teaching using the audio linguistic method. Yeah, in communicative competence class, we always careful with our grammar, in the usage of our grammar, in order for us to really understand what we are going to say to our students, in order for them to understand to us what we are going to say to them. So in communicative approach, both form, structure, and meaning in language are emphasizes. And language uses are two different aspects. So in communicative competence, language use and usage are two different in each others. And we are done now to the theories of communicative competence. So at this point of time, let us discuss the 4 dimensions of communicative competence. So let me class for you to easily understand or what are these dimensions of communicative competence are. Okay? The first one, grammatical competence. Grammatical competence class, it is the linguistic competence, the mastery of linguistic code, ability to recognize the lexical or spelling, morphological or meaning bearer units of a language, syntactical or meaning, and phonological or sounds features to form the words and sentences demonstrated. That is the first dimension of communication competence. The number 2, social linguistic competence. Social linguistic competence class, it is the understanding and knowledge of the social roles of language. The social context in which language is used, the rules of participants, the information they share, and the function of interaction has to do with the appropriateness of utterances. So that is the number 2 dimensions of communicative competence. Now, number 3, discourse competence. So when we say discourse competence class, it is the ability to produce and understand a series of utterances that form a meaningful whole. So discourse competence, that is the meaning of discourse competence. It is the ability to produce and understanding the series of utterances that form a meaning whole. Number 4, or the last dimension of communicative competence, is strategic competence. It is the ability to compensate for the communication breakdown and for imperfect knowledge of rules like coping or survival strategies. So from the word strategic. Again, the 4 dimensions of communicative. The first is grammatical competence. Number 2, socialistic or sociolinguistic competence. Number 3, discourse competence. And number 4, strategic competence. So those are the 4 dimensions of communicative competence. Communicative principles class, that is the language teaching approach or the rules of the usage and the rules in the language of communicative language teaching, or CLT. And the other one is communicative approach, or the CA. Let us talk first class the number 1 principles of CLT or CAA. There are 6 class principles of CLT or CA. Communication involves much more than simply knowledge of forms. Depends on the ability to use forms that in appropriate ways. So in principle number 1 class, not only knowing the rules of grammar, but we as a future teacher or if students, we also know how to use the language skills in socio-cultural context that learners are exposed. So that is the principles number 1. Next, let us proceed to the principles number 2. Communication should result in the performance of some real and specific tasks in foreign language. This means that this calls for the ability of the language learner to use a language in actual situations. So that is the principle number 2. Now let us proceed to the principle number 3. I am too fast, class. Anyway, so principles number 3, communication cannot be easily analyzed into component features without its nature being destroyed in the process. Yeah, in communication class, we undergo many process. So according to the principle, communication cannot be easily analyzed into component features. It is not enough to be able to decipher or produce individual elements of the message, and what is needed is the ability to work in the context of the whole. Also, the meaning of the message should not be taken, tasted on individual elements of the students, but also the whole meaning of the message. So, we as a student class, if we communicate to other person or to another, we should know what are the message it's is all about. Not only the grammar, we not only observe the grammar, but also the meaning of the message that she sent to us. Principle number 4, the vital process of communication are followed, or letter A. Information gap communication entails information transfer in order to connect lapses interaction. Letter B. Choose or choice rather. Communication involves choosing the areas or ideas to be expressed at given moment, and likewise adopting the appropriate linguistic forms to verbalize such concepts. So in choice class, we need to choose the right ideas, the right opinions, the right perspective to express a given moment in adopting the appropriate linguistic message. So that is number 2, vital process of communication. Number 3, or letter C, the feedback. So we as a listener, as a receiver, we should know the feedback of that message. Feedback. Communication must adequately provide practice in using language for real purposes, that is the verbalize of the speaker's aims in everyday interaction. So we as a listener, we as a receiver, we need to feedback the message, the communication, in order for us to really understand what is the message is all about. We need to give feedback to the sender. And the number 5 principle of the CLT or CA is the affirmation processes of communication can be solely implemented through practicing communicative activities, thus affirming a cardinal tenet of learning, that is one learns to do by doing, the affirmation process. Number 6, communication is severely impaired by a number of glaring grammatical and phonological mistakes. So we, as a student, again, we have a what we call grammatical mistakes, phonological mistakes. So sometimes, if we talk, we have a mistakes. That is why we need to practice more. We need to enhance our communication skills in order for us to fluently speaking in the near future. So those are the principles of communicative teaching or learning teaching. Now, let us proceed to the last one, communication or the salient features of the communication approach. So inferred by the authorities in the field of language teaching methodology. Number 1, The emphasis of the communicative approach leans heavily on teaching communication competence, social-linguistic competence. So that is the number one salient features of the CA, meaning the emphasis of the communicative approach lend to heavily teaching communication competence. So teachers need to emphasize the teaching or the communicative teaching of the students. Number two, the communicative approach affords the second language learners optimum practice in the use of the target language in as much as the corresponding repertoire of communicative techniques and activities promote greater interaction between the learner and the teachers among the teacher and among the learners. Yeah, it is a very important class that the teachers and students have the greater interaction, because if the student can ask to the teacher and the teacher can answer, so that is the heavily interaction between the teachers and the learners. Number three, the communicative methods concentration on aspect of the use of language results in the commission of mistakes. Again, we teachers we commit mistakes, right, in grammar, in our intonation. So particularly of grammar, what I've said earlier, we teachers, as future teachers, we commit mistakes sometimes. So formal accuracy must be sacrificed or language use. Of use, errors in language forms true demand the language teacher's immediate intention and rectification or correction. So in other words, when I say the rectification or correction, the teachers is obliged to correct their students or learners if they don't have understand or they commit mistakes or the grammar is not okay or the grammar is not wrong. Of course, the teachers will correct to their learners. Number four, learning to use the language at the discourse or above the sentence level offers the students adequate activities in cohesion or how we join the sentence together to form grammatical units, and coherence, how we organize our sentences to form sense units, a meaningful flow of ideas. Of course, if our ideas is, if our grammar, if our intonation is correct, the flow of the message to other is very correct. Now, let us proceed to the salient features of the CA, which is the grammatical units. So, first, let us study what is morpheme. When you say morpheme, it is the smallest unit of speech. It includes the word, the phrase. So when we say word, it is a meaningful unit. When you say phrase, it is the string of words. So those are the under of morpheme. When you say morpheme again, it is the smallest unit of speech, or speech. And the number two is sentence. The sentence is the meaningful linguistic unit. Sentence is very important in structure. It is very important to create a sentence incorrect in our grammar, again, in our word, in our phrase, in order for us to easily understand of our students. For example, the grammatical units. This is the example of morpheme. The man whom you have seen is one of the best Vietnamese pianists. That is all, and Miss Campo Mayor will continue the report. Thank you, and may God bless you all. I hope you've learned a lot. You've learned some today or perspective today. If you have questions, don't hesitate to chat me via messenger, via text, or hesitate to ask me some questions. Thank you.